we have also today, as a surprise, and we are really extremely happy to have these two professionals, amazing science artists, researchers who will enlighten us with their presentations. So we will start this afternoon with the work of Amanda Dawn Christie, who is an interdisciplinary artist in media, film, installation, and performance. She worked in transmission artworks, and over the past decade, her artworks have been presented in 5 continents and numerous galleries, museums, and research facilities. So I don't want to use more of her time because I'm really, really excited about her presentation. So I leave you with Amanda Dawn Christie.
Thank you very much, Christian. Sorry to be a little late joining in. I had a lot of trouble with figuring out Zoom and Keynote, but I'm all set and honored to be here. So my talk today, I wanted to, well, talk about my practice, which has a lot to do with the electromagnetic spectrum as well as medical imaging technologies. And I'm going to start my timer to keep me on to the 20-minute thing. So countdown timer's running, and I'm going to work on sharing full screen with you so you have my presentation here. I will quit out of this. There's the keynote, and we're off. Da, da, da. And I'll share my keynote. I will hit share, and I will hit play. And do you see my keynote?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, good. And do you see me as well, or just the keynote?
Yes, I see you on one side of the screen.
Okay, perfect. So I'll get my mouse out of the way. So my presentation today is called Working with Energy for Material for Creation. So that relationship between energy and matter in kind of an abstract poetic approach. Specifically, artistic interventions with space science and research instruments and medical imaging technologies. Before I continue, can you hear me okay? I usually use headphones. I can add those if that's better.
No problem. I can hear you.
Audio's good? All right. So, so a lot of my interest is in the electromagnetic spectrum. I come from a film and photo background, which relies a lot on light, and I was fascinated with light, but light forms just such a small part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and I became very fascinated with the rest of the spectrum: infrared, radio waves, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, etc. My interest first began with a project called Transmissions. It was an expanded cinema performance for 2 16mm film projectors, exploring that relationship between these waves that are passing through our bodies all the time that we don't think about it. When people hear of a transmission artist or someone who works with radio, they often think of radio as something obsolete. But transmission, this encompasses everything from Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, satellite navigation, air traffic control, military surveillance, your remote car starter, and the thing that unlocks your door. Anything remote control, it's working with electromagnetic waves. And so, and a lot of these things are passing through our bodies all the time. And we don't think about it a lot. And I like to see them as these sort of invisible architectures or landscapes, and that we wind up becoming invisible, unintentional witnesses to things that may or may not be intended for us. I won't go into detail too much, but the next project that consumed 6 years of my life was this 2-hour-long experimental documentary film about the RCI International Shortwave Radio Towers in Sackville, New Brunswick. Shortwave radio travels all the way around the world. It ricochets between the ionosphere and the Earth's surface. And you know, we rely heavily on the internet, and a lot of people feel this site, Canada's only site of its kind, was torn down because of obsolescence. So everyone has the internet, but it didn't acknowledge the digital divide, that only 20 to 40% of the world has access to the internet. And as we're realizing now with online teaching, you know, many of our students don't have reliable access to the internet. There's shared family computers. high-speed internet. Oh, I forgot to connect my high-speed. If I start to glitch, let me know. Concordia sent me an internet stick because I'm running on DSL phone lines where I live. So if I glitch, let me know and I will put on, plug into the internet stick. But yeah, and we all know there's places where you don't get cell phone reception, right? So the thing with shortwave is you can't really block it. Like in the Cold War, there would be jamming signals. But this site in Sackville, New Brunswick was actually the first site to break through the jamming signals of the Iron Curtain and Radio Free Europe was actually transmitted from Sackville, New Brunswick in Atlantic Canada to travel over the ocean to reach many communist countries during the Cold War. So shortwave radio is something that gets through to places where internet, satellite, and cell phone services don't. And yet we tend to destroy these things, believing that they're obsolete. We just have this desire for progress and moving forward. So when I was living in Sackville, I built this radio out of a toilet paper tube, and it picked up Italian radio. And I thought, I did great. What a great job. And it turned out no, I didn't do a great job. I was just living really close to this massive international shortwave station that runs a lot of power. And I found out that many people there heard the radio in their sinks, in their kitchen sinks. If they had enough copper plumbing in the house, the copper pipe acted as an antenna, and a poorly soldered joint between two different types of metal becomes a diode. And then the sink essentially functioned as a gramophone speaker. So it's a glorified foxhole radio, which is the sort you would build with wires and a paperclip during World War I. And well, I was jealous. My sink didn't play the radio, and you can't go buy a Sony Syncman. So I figured if radio sinks exist in nature, I should be able to reverse engineer one myself. So I began the Marshland radio plumbing project, in which I took these, I don't know if you see my mouse, but the schematics for a very simple foxhole radio, minimal components, and translated it to plumbing. And my goal was to create a functional radio with no electronic components whatsoever. And so I would take this out on the marsh and try to pick up the radio in my sink. Move on a little bit from there. Another image just about the different bands within the electromagnetic spectrum. So within radio waves, we also have microwaves, and which actually, if you have Wi-Fi at home, if your router's near your microwave, you might want to move it because they're kind of on the same frequency. If you've ever noticed, sometimes you're using Wi-Fi and it cuts out, it's because, well, the microwave is, that 2.4 gigahertz, that's your Wi-Fi is a microwave. And so the link with broadcast television I threw up there because Last Days of Snow is an art project I did about the end of analog television broadcasts. And everything was switching over from analog to digital. And again, it's this idea, march of progress. We're going to have digital. This is going to be better. But the problem is that it kind of ignored certain rural communities. It made the assumption that people have cable and satellite TV, or they can afford the digital converters, because there are digital converters that you could put with your television with rabbit ears. But people who in poverty or the elderly who might not be so tech savvy, all of a sudden lost access to, our public broadcasters and information. So I had this battery operated little portable television, and I did a series of performances that I video recorded. I think the next file plays the video. Yeah, it's a series of videos of me with this television in various locations waiting for the end of the final transmission. And it's kind of like the end of a relationship. I don't watch a lot of TV, but in this instance, it was like, when there's a couple and you're about to break up, but no one wants to talk about it yet, or maybe one person's dying and it's awkward. So there's these images of me in absurd locations, like a swimming pool or in a hotel, basically waiting for the transmissions to stop, and knowing that would happen at any time. So this would be exhibited on various CRT monitors. And then as the end of analog transmissions came to an end, I did various projects contacting people in different time zones, waiting, asking if anyone would record their TV the moment it cut out. So that's a part of another project. Moving on, as I was working on the film about these radio towers, there was 2 years they were inoperational, but still standing the demolition. So I would camp out nearby and hike in. I don't necessarily want to say trespassing, but I knew that if I went in from the back of the marsh, I wouldn't set off any alarms. And I would, it was quite a hike in through these tall marsh grasses with my sound equipment over my head. And I placed contact microphones on the radio towers. And contact microphones turn sound into vibration. And it's like hearing the heartbeat of the tower. And these were 400 feet tall, or yeah, so 113 meters. And it's actually below sea level. So the vibrations of each one had its own voice. And I felt like I was listening to the heartbeat of these towers. This is me on top of a 50-foot tower. I got my climbing certification and climbed 2 of the towers. Spoiler, it sounds the same at the top as at the bottom, but still part of the experience. I don't know if you can hear this sound, but this is the sound that those contact microphone recordings made. And they're very haunting. And I was when they demolished the site, I was the only person on site documenting the end of this. And this was a major part of Canada's history. Built during World War II, played a very important role both in terms of culture and politics around the world. And this is not the sort of thing that will get rebuilt. This is the sort of thing where they tore it down, and should something ever happen to the internet, rebuilding something like this is not feasible anymore. And this is the sound that those contact microphone recordings made. So the film is 2 hours, and the last half hour, you're just watching the demolition happen slowly, bit by bit. And so next slide. After I made that, the documentary was fairly straightforward. So I did a piece called Requiem for Radio, which was kind of more of an abstract mourning of those towers. The towers really took on this kind of personality for me. Each one had its own voice. And so the Requiem for Radio had multiple parts, and Pulse Decay is a piece where I played a theremin. I don't know if you can see my theremin behind me there, but I ran control voltage from the theremin to an Arduino, and then into a computer running a program in Super Collider and processing that would trigger those contact microphone recordings that I played. So instead of hearing the usual woo sound of a theremin, there are 13 towers, which makes 13 notes of a chromatic scale from tonic to tonic. So each of those recordings I had basically pitch shifted to be a note. And so I had a note where I could play melodies with this theremin, but what you were hearing was the notes of the towers, and they triggered video projections right here. And each projection was the image of the tower you were hearing. So if you're hearing Tower H, you see Tower H. This evolved into a much bigger project, Requiem for Radio, Full Quiet Flutter. You see here, it's a scale model of the RCI site built entirely of plumbing components to reference the sink. And it has these interactive pads on it that if you touch them, they trigger those contact microphone recordings. So there was 13 towers, 13 speakers. You can see all the speakers here. And we had compositions, 3 performers, all women, and we had 3 octaves, the same note, and we performed by touching the towers. There were very many other aspects. The other important part of that project was there were 12 movements because it's a requiem, so 13 towers, 12 movements. I added movement 0 at the beginning so I could have 13 movements. But I had this image in my head of radio transmission sites around the world mourning the loss of their sister site. I really kind of anthropomorphized them, and I believe it's Jane Bennett who talks about anthropomorphization can be a tool to help us avoid anthropocentrism, right? So to acknowledge like the importance of the vitality and the thingness of objects. And so I had this image of radio sites around the world calling out to their fallen sister sites. And so I commissioned a friend, a composer, to create an hour-long piece. We took William Byrd's Mass for the Dead from 1694 and converted it's a Latin text, converted into Morse code, which is still used on shortwave. And he used my contact mic recordings for the music and stretched it out, but made the 5 voices were 5 radio stations. And I bought airtime on 5 radio stations around the world, and actually got the announcers there to record themselves reading a script I prepared. So it's like, this is German shortwave service calling out to Radio Canada International. Come in, Canada. Come in, where are you? Acknowledge, acknowledge. So we had Germany, Austria, Miami, Monticello, and Pirate Radio Boston, all calling out to wonder where Canada was. And the idea was, you know, when you have a friend who dies and their number's still in your phone book, but you forget, you go to call them. So for this performance, I actually got each of those to play a different track of the same piece and to start at the exact same time. So we had an antenna on the roof of the theater, and in the theater, the 3 of us would operate these shortwave radios to receive like the alto was, because we did record humans singing the Kyrie, which is the 2nd movement of the Requiem. It's in Greek, and all it says is Christ forgive us. And so we had like the alto coming from Germany, the tenor from Boston, and we were able to combine the whole piece. What we didn't anticipate, I made QSL cards, mostly as a promo thing, but a lot of people in the shortwave community got very excited, sent me recordings of what they recorded from around the world, and I sent out QSL cards. My time is getting short, so I'm gonna scoot through here. Radio waves and space science. So then shortwave radio got me introduced to the hacking community. I didn't consider myself a hacker. I was later told, you built the radio out of a sink, so that makes you a hacker. It's like, okay. So I attended the Circle of Hope, which is Hackers on Planet Earth conference in New York. And that's where I met Dr. Chris Fallon, who's the chief scientist at HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, the most powerful radio transmitter on the planet. And it's 180 radio transmitters in a matrix that takes up 33 acres of land in a very remote area of Alaska. And they don't transmit messages. There's all sorts of conspiracy theories about this place, that it's used for weather weapons or mind control. But what they're really doing is they're trying to understand how radio waves interfere with the aurora, because there's still very little known about that. So they generally transmit straight up, and they're just high frequency radio waves, and they generate artificial aurora. And Chris Fallon, being a ham radio operator, embedded an SS. So this is an image of one of the aurora they generated. They're not big, they're very tiny, small glowing spots. And he embedded an SSTV image. So SSTV is slow scan television that it sounds like an internet modem. And so he transmitted that just to see who around the world could receive it. And he also, oops, I didn't mean to pull that up. He also transmitted a giant picture of his cat, the first giant cat picture sent into space, because these things go to the ionosphere, but a lot of it shoots through. And as well as an audio version of the Star Spangled Banner. I don't want to minimize what he did. I think it was awesome, but I was sitting there in that audience thinking, you know, I think I could maybe do something a bit more poetic and critical. So I approached him afterwards, and because he jokingly said, if anyone has any ideas, it's only $5,000 US an hour to run the machine. I went up to him after, I was like, I'm good at getting grants. I think I could pull this off. And so here I am at HAARP last March. I got funding to create an artwork using HAARP. I will skip that. Some considerations I had to think about were the fact that there's definitely an engagement with the military, because, just pulling up the chat. So yeah, so basically HARP was built by the Air Force and DARPA and the Navy and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And even though it's run and managed by the University of Fairbanks, Alaska right now, a lot of the research is still being done by the military. When I was there, it was NRL, Navy, the Naval Research Lab, AFRL, the Air Force Research Lab, and the and DARPA. And I'm a pacifist, so then I have to question complicity. Like, what is my role as a pacifist artist creating artwork for this instrument that's used primarily by the military developing surveillance technologies? And I knew that what I was making was being monitored by these groups. And so, you know, I can't just hit them over the head with a left-wing message. They'll just write me off. So then the question became, how do I engage them? And so in the creation of the work, I started to, I was writing poetry in Morse code. I had storytelling spelled out in the NATO phonetic alphabet. So basically they had to actually decode what I was transmitting. And I think that it's very relevant now where we have the Air Force Space Command, and just since December, the United Space Force now exists. So that's a little scary. I'm out of time, so I won't go through the conspiracies, but because of all the conspiracy theories, there's a popular book called Angels Don't Play This Harp. And as a result, the folks at HARP, and some people drove up with guns to kill all the scientists in 2016 in order to release the souls of the dead because God told them to. But the folks at HARP actually named their generators Angel 1, Angel 2, Angel 3. So angels do play this harp. So my project, Ghosts in the Airglow, it was a 1-hour piece transmitted from HARP that contained audio and SSTV images. I put it into 10 movements. So each one I was able to do what I wanted with the beams. So some of them were trying to make air glow. Some were split between transmitting towards Russia and Washington. So different things were going on in there. This is a software-defined radio interface. I won't play a clip of it because I'm out of time. Oh, I guess I am playing a clip of it. There we go. These are some of the test patterns I transmitted. An important part of the project was images from my family. I make a lot of my work with personal information. And so my grandfather in 1962 found this thing called, that the family always called the mystery box, or the thing in the woods. And you can see here in this image, that's what it sounded like sending, this is what an SSTV image sounds like, but I'll scoot back. So the Department of Defense took this thing away. It looked like a refrigerator. It had antennas and cameras inside. They said it was a weather balloon. Just 2 years ago, information was released by the CIA saying that it was part of a Project Genetrix spying on Russia. And so I will just, scoot ahead. These are the images that people around the world received. And there's a conspiracy about me because they claimed that I was using that for satanic ritual. And my final projects to wrap up, new projects I'm working on, I'm interested in radio telescopes, how we can make images with radio waves, but we can also make images inside the body with sound waves. So this is a mammogram or an ultrasound of my right breast. I have a tumor, and these are images of the planet Venus taken with the Arecibo radio telescope. And I was really interested in those parallels between the human body and the cosmos when we work with sound waves and radio waves for imaging. This is an ultrasound of the tumor in my breast, and again, the surface of planet Venus, and a polyps in my uterus and planet Venus. So going forward, I plan to work with astronomers to use radio telescopes and that connection between the inside of the body and the cosmos and how similar they are. And I'll wrap it up at that. I can stop my screen share now. So thank you very much.
That was absolutely fantastic. So I'm sure there's many questions. So I will hand it to Catherine, who is collecting the questions, and she will ask you what the people is wondering.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you so much. What an amazing project. If anybody has any questions, you can just put it in the Zoom chat and I'll read them out sort of as they come. We do have one question already, actually from one of our panelists. We'd love to read a poem in Morse code. Is it available anywhere to read?
I had it in the presentation, but I was running out of time. Do you want to hear it or read it? Because Morse code is such an audio language.
Interesting. So the question says read, but I mean, hearing it would be interesting too, I would think.
Okay, I will not screen share, but what I'll do is I'll go to the keynote and see if I can go to that slide and play this one. Sorry about that. I want to make sure I can see you guys too. Here we go. Can you hear this?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have the text right in front of me. Mm-hmm. And it's been a long time it's been a year since I wrote it, but I remember that the idea behind the final poem was about, contemplating essentially the end of the world and knowing that these are military people. And I was kind of riffing off of T.S. Eliot's This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. I changed it to, is this the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whisper? And whisper there in radio talk, WSPR stands for weak signal propagation reporting, which is for faint distance microwaves, such as what we receive from the Big Bang or the cosmos. The other thing I didn't mention in terms of the work with the televisions is what really interested me with analog television is that 1% of the snow in analog television, 1% of that is residual radiation from the Big Bang. And so every time you're trying to move those antennas to get rid of the snow, you're becoming an unintentional witness to the beginning of the universe, which I think is amazing. Wow. Whereas digital is just on or off. So those were some of the ideas that I was putting into the poem, questions about existence and waves, the beginning and the end of the universe, and what's our role going to be in that?
Interesting. I have another question here that actually kind of sparks off of this role idea. So somebody would like to know, does the work with technology that you do change your daily experience and your relationship with it, like the internet and that sort of thing?
Kind of, yeah, especially since I know when I first worked as a photographer in the 90s. I was a commercial photographer, then got into film, then got into electronics. I noticed that since beginning photography, I don't really take snapshots or pictures of friends or family because it becomes work. And then more recently, since I got involved with the hacking community, I am a lot more aware of internet vulnerabilities. And I'm by no means a security expert, but I'm gradually working on kind of removing my internet presence and, working with things like onion browsers and VPNs and kind of, so it's changed my daily things like that. Like I've got a few camera stickers from the Tor project. And so I'm becoming a lot more aware of vulnerability. Yeah. And then the other thing that it's changed is my relationship to, for instance, like the way the algorithms that feed people on Google, that conspiracy theory that came out about me, it was a flat earther, and he made a 20-minute video claiming I was using HAARP for satanic ritual. And his justification was this Google search that brought up all this stuff about the Illuminati. And he's like, see, this is a coincidence, And I'm like, no, if you Google that all the time, that's what's going to come up.
Yeah.
And so it raised that as a real issue for me. So I actually make a point now to always delete my browsers and my cache. I don't want to be getting things catered to me. That's.
Interesting. Okay, do we have time for another question, Christian, or are we okay? No? Okay, thank you so much.
So I definitely say it's like, as weird as it might sound, it's kind of like interesting to get part of a conspiracy theory. It's scary and kind of like funny at the same time. Scary funny. So thank you so much, Amanda, for this presentation. Your art is just incredibly beautiful and interesting and a true collide between art and science. So we are really, really happy to have host you today here, and we are hoping to listen again from you in the future about your projects. So I put in the chat the website of Amanda if you guys want to learn more of her projects, past projects. Is a place where you can actually check there. Yeah. So
actually, I'll put in also the website for that project with HARP, which is actually www.ghostintheairglow.space. I got a .space account for that one.
Great.
It'll be changing soon, but yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much. We will continue now with the part of the Science Symposium. So we will start to invite our students to present their experiments in science communication. So the first